Hello, my name is Toby Bray. Thank you for joining me today. I'm the founder of Engine Room Marketing, and I've been working in social media since Twitter launched in July of 2006. My background includes software development, sales, marketing, and marketing automation. Today, we're going to focus on measuring social media campaigns designed to influence people's beliefs and ideas more than really attempting to get them to purchase something. While we'll look at conversions, which is what purchases are about, because some parts of social media campaigns involve conversions, e-commerce is outside of today's scope. So let's dig in, and remember, you have 3 seconds to impress me. We'll cover a lot of ground today. And first, we'll talk briefly about some rules for creating posts that get clicks. The better the message going into this engine, the more clicks you'll get out of it. So we're just going to touch on a few rules. Next, we'll talk about how to think about messages in a marketplace where attention is currency, where you're competing with other messages to get a target's attention, target's person. We'll talk about the generally accepted measures in the industry and where you're going to find them and how to organize your measurement program. We'll also talk about what to report, and we'll provide you with a way to wire a platform that you can use for free to practice social media and social media measurement. So let's quickly review these rules for posting that we're talking about. So rule number 1, it's not about you. Social media created an oxymoron of sorts. It teaches people that they should be the center of a self-made universe. But inside an organization, who comes first, the organization or the target? Salespeople tend to like to talk about themselves. And after they're done talking about themselves, the next thing they say is, but enough about me. Let's hear you talk about me. That's not really a person you want to interact with. So in the social media space, one of the important things to remember is 90% of the time, you're going to be talking about the target, not the organization. The organization's going to talk about press releases and new hires and maybe new products. That's about 10% of the time, okay? Targets always want to know what's in it for me, or with them. What's in it for me, not what's in it for you. You can just simply listen to a car dealership advertisement on the radio and hear this. They'll tell you they're the sales leader in volume in the region. What does that mean to you? Does it mean you're going to get a better deal? You want to think about that for a minute, because you might not get a better deal. They might just be better at selling. Rule 2, if you don't know your target, you don't have a target. Knowing your target is critical to succeeding. Many of you have been introduced to personas, but often personas fail to provide the detail you're going to need to craft a message or a post. Age, education, zip code, income, gender, and likes will give you some insights, into your writing style. But without understanding how a target perceives a problem, the content gets really tricky to create. There are 2 predominant modes of thinking in which targets engage. They want to be a member of a club, or they need to solve a problem. Problems deal with commerce. They need a new apartment. They've got to find a roof for a house. They need to find a new hot water heater. But being a member of a club is what we're all about right now. Being a member of a club means being first, being exclusive, and having something that other people don't have or they can be jealous of. So we're going to be working in that space where people want to be a member of the club, and you're running the club. Rule 3, benefits, not features. Brains don't like to do heavy lifting, right? Remember, the oldest part of the brain still thinks in pictures, and those pictures are tied to emotions. So maybe a couple of you have just said, I've got emojis on my phone, and I use those emojis to communicate larger concepts in a single icon than having to type out a lot of information. When you have 3 seconds to get someone's attention, You need to tell them how you're going to change their life on their terms, but you don't need to give them all the details. Details require too much thought. When they can, the best salespeople only talk benefits until the ink dries on the deal. And they talk about the details and educating the buyer. The reason for that is Rule 4. And that's targets care about their future. In general, people don't buy the past or the present. They buy the future. There are exceptions. People will pay a lot of money to go to a live concert where, a band from their youth is getting back together and playing music they want to hear. But for the most part, people don't buy the past or the present. They buy the future. So you want to paint a picture where your target sees themselves in a future state with the need satisfied, right? Their need needs to be satisfied. Targets unaware of their pain are a different story. And if you want to learn more about that, the thing to do is to go read a couple of books on selling, because selling touches a lot on exposing people to pain they didn't know they had and how to motivate them. Rule 5, attention is currency. When you're writing, you want to be thinking, am I willing to pay someone $500 a word to read my message? You have 3 seconds to get my attention, because all those competing ideas and distractions are just a mouse click away. When you're done writing your message, set it down, walk away from it, come back to it later, read it, and ask if it's worth your target's attention. You've only got 3 seconds to get someone's attention. Make it count. Rule 6, measure with care. Okay? Couple of other rules that float around this one. Don't measure what you can't change, and don't change what you can't measure. And don't measure anything that isn't tied to a goal. There are lots of data lakes out there full of information occupying space that are never being queried. So before you set down to measure something, make sure it ties back to the mission's objectives and that it answers a question worth asking. Rule 7, organize for success, right? Be consistent in naming assets, tags, campaigns, both locally as you're creating them and across your platforms. Good campaigns can get complex, so it's important to keep content, assets, data, all of that organized with a naming scheme that makes sense. So you want to develop that naming structure and follow it as closely as you can. It's critical to your success, and if you take other people on into your organization or your social team, it helps them succeed as well. And it leaves a positive legacy. So when you move on, someone who comes in behind you is able to understand what you were doing and the rationale behind it. And now a quick bonus rule. When in doubt, check protocol. Because once it's out there, it's out there. There are bots that take screenshots of every public post some people create. And as soon as they take that snapshot, even if you go out to Twitter or you go out to Facebook and you take that post down, somebody has screen capped it and now they're sharing it. So when you're in doubt, go back, check protocol, don't make the post. We've been talking about posts and messaging. What's the anatomy of a post look like, right? We're going to use those two terms a little interchangeably, message and post. So let's spend a few minutes building the foundation of messages that are memorable, measurable, and get clicks. So the first thing I want to say is I want to ask a question, right? Why simple messages? And it's important because organizations are full of voices with a lot to say. And the challenge here is they often want to say everything rather than what the target wants to hear. And the target's got a lot on their mind. It's full of distractions. They've got lots of opportunities to click away, right? So what gets their attention is what's important. And it's only a tiny sliver of what your organization thinks it wants to say and what's inside the target's head, what's on their mind. So what's the formula? It's pretty straightforward. Would you like to be in this future state? Remember, we talked about folks are not buying the past or the present, they're buying the future. Would you like to be in this future state? Would you like to see yourself driving the car, being the hero, being a member of the club, right? Now you can. And this is simply here as a connector for you to connect this next piece of information, right? Here's how. Click here, read this, share it with your friends, be the hero, be the first to know, find the clue. Find the clue? And I'm talking right now about conspiracy theories because they work so well. They're gamification of information. And in some ways, social media campaigns are the same thing. They're enticing the brain to take the next step, to solve the clue, to solve the puzzle, to get what they want, to see themselves in the future. So don't overlook parts of game theory when you're thinking about how to structure messages. Just remember, you've got 3 seconds. It can't be complicated. A quick note. College taught us to write this way. Introduction, conclusion. Big introduction, get to your point. Pages, pages and pages. Next is, so how did social media teach us to read? Social media taught us to read by starting with, what's in it for me? And then give me the details. And chances are, if you connect with me, when you tell me about the future and what's in it for me, I'm not even going to bother to go to the details. I'm going to follow you where you want me to go because you've shown me what can be rather than what is. Really important is localization or localizing. You're not the target, I'm not the target. Different cultures have different communication rules and social norms. So you really need to know them. If you're going to communicate outside of the US or into a culture with different social norms, you simply just can't convert the language. You have to understand the social norms in order to understand how to communicate with them. Let's get into measurement. Let's talk about what good goals are. And I'm sure some of you have seen these before, but it's really important to review them quickly and talk about them. First and foremost, vague goal is a bad goal. You really want a specific goal, right? It's not like I want to go to the gym because I want to lose weight. You want to say, I want to lose 15 pounds in 2 months. That also helps with the next bullet point, which is measurable. How do you know when you've accomplished your goal? Is it when you get a conversion rate of X% on social media? Is it when you've increased traffic by so many people per month? Well, if we go back to our gym example, in 2 months we wanted to lose 30 pounds, 15 pounds. If it's 2 months, we can also do measurements every week and see if we're progressing towards our goal. And we're going to talk about why that's important when we talk about optimizing campaigns. Next is attainable. It's good to be ambitious, but your first post will not get 3 or 4 million shares. So when you're setting your goal, be realistic about it. Next is be relevant. Your goal should map back to the mission's goals. And finally, timely. It's going to give your organization the motivation to accomplish it. Maybe you want to get 500 shares within 2 days. Maybe you want to get 400,000 shares within a month. Maybe it's a longer term goal. Maybe you want to increase your user base by a certain percentage over the year. All of those are timely if that's what the mission is looking for. So campaigns, I talked about this earlier, but I just want to talk about it one more time. We're going to be focusing on spreading ideas and influencing people, not really driving purchases or other actions. What can you measure? We can measure awareness, which is kind of current and potential audience. We can measure audience interaction, engagement. Then those two further down here are conversions, which is really campaign effectiveness, and we will talk about that. And then consumer measurements, how customers view your brand. That's more post-purchase. So what are the metrics you use to measure each one of these areas? So under awareness, brand awareness. It's attention expressed through, a number of social media metrics like mentions, shares, likes, and impressions. And then there's audience growth rate, right? That's the change in size over a reporting period. You started with 100 followers, you have 1,000 followers. It's been a month. Was that the goal? Then the next one is post reach. How many people have seen your content? That's it. Just how many people have seen your content. The next is impressions. And impressions are how many times your content was displayed, clicked or not. Now, impressions often come into play in paid media where you're buying advertising. So you may or may not use this depending on whether you're buying access to try to drive clicks. The next is potential reach. And that measures the number of people who could realistically see a post during a reporting period. And the way you want to think about that is you say, if 5% of my audience shares my post, then 2% of their followers will see it. That's the potential reach beyond your current audience. What is social share of voice? How many people are talking about your brand versus your competitor's brand? It may also be words around your brand. The lower level tools don't necessarily measure that. We'll get into which tools do in a little bit. So now let's move on to the engagement space, where we'll talk about applause rate. That's likes and favorites. That's claps. That's people clicking the like button. And then there's average engagement rate, which is the applause rate divided by the entire audience. The next one is the amplification rate, and that's the ratio of shares per post to the number of overall followers. And then virality rate, the count of audience members who shared your post divided by the number of impressions. Remember, impressions were how many times your content was displayed, whether it was clicked or not. And then finally, as we just touch briefly on conversion, click-through rate of the total clicks divided by the number of total impressions. That's the number of people who clicked on what's called a call to action in your message. And then conversion rate, or in this case, the social conversion rate, is the number of visitors who, after clicking on your CTA, took the next action. That might be subscribing to a newsletter, reading a blog, things of that nature. So then there are other measures that I'm just going to show here briefly in this space. Conversion rate, bounce rate, cost per click, cost per 1,000 impressions, or CPM. These are mostly website measures. The next one, testimonials, satisfaction scores, and net promoter scores are all really involved with customers. So now let's talk about where you're going to measure. So social platform tools, including tools like Hootsuite, allow you to measure content for the most part. But when we start to move into this conversion space, over here, we've got to bring in Google Analytics and other tools, because the social platform tools don't know what happens after a conversion. After someone clicks on that CTA, that's typically where they stop measuring. So you need another platform to be able to connect those dots. Do you remember back when I said be very careful with how you name campaigns, because you may be going across platforms? This is one of those places where you want to be careful about naming campaigns. One of those things I touch on because occasionally this will come to you in the form of somebody above you saying, well, I think we can do X, right? You're in control of the post or message in the CTA. Your target controls everything else. You cannot tell your target what to do. You can only encourage them. When we're working on a campaign, during that campaign, right, we're going to be looking at messages and data. Those are the important things we want to be looking at during a campaign. And we're going to talk about how we use the data to keep improving the message during a campaign. After a campaign, we're really going to be focused on goals and data and optimizing future campaigns. So let's talk a little bit about optimizing an active campaign. The way you do that is really by A/B split testing. So the goal of split testing is to find the best message to get your target to take action. And the way you do that is use sports brackets really to give you an idea of how to think about it. But before you start, you want to think about, how do I name my brackets and my messaging so that I can keep track of them? And maybe a way to do that for you might be campaign, round, message, variant. Okay? And it might look like this. So here's campaign 1, round 1, message 1, variant 1, and variant 2. We're going to run that for a period of time and see which one of those messages gets more interaction, reaches the goal that we've set. We'll take that one and we'll create another one, and we'll run those two against one another. You see that we brought in campaign 1, message 1, variant 3. The R2 is round 2. Now those two are going to go head to head for a while. Finally, we have a winner. This is round 3, message 1, variant 2. You can keep going on this as long as you need to. You really can only change one element at a time when you're split testing. And the reason for that is that if you change 2 elements, you won't know which one of those changes influenced the click. So let's touch on a couple of these. Post length, keeping in mind that too much detail might lead the target to click away, right? So you want to keep the post length clear. Post style, what are the words you use in the post? Are they hard? Are they soft? Or are they for people who like to think or people who like to feel? What emojis did you use? What punctuation did you use? For example, younger generations don't care about punctuation, so you can ignore it if that's your target. Then tone of voice. Is it hard or soft, stern or inviting? How about headline? Does your headline start to tell the story? Does it engage the person in the first few words and tell them to read more? Next one is hashtags. Hashtags are great, and they can pull in audiences outside your followers. So they can be really powerful. When you're preparing a campaign, one of the things you want to do is understand the hashtags in both Twitter, Facebook, maybe LinkedIn, and other social platforms that are associated with the context of your campaign. You want to look at them and find out how much traffic they have or how much activity they have around them, and take a quick scan of the kind of posts that are associated with the tags, and then employ them if it makes sense. They can be really useful. CTA, call to action. Get your free copy, take action now, be the first to know. Modify the CTA, see which one of those works best. And the last one is image or video. Change up the image, change up video if you're using video. But remember, you can only change one thing at a time in a round. Now, what happens if you want to test 2 different elements in a campaign? Well, let's say you want to test a CTA and you want to test an image and run those against one another in a larger campaign. Well, run multiple brackets. You'll notice here that we have campaign 1A and campaign 1B. And you can see that our CTA was campaign 1A, message 1, variant 2, 1. And over here, image, which was message 1, variant 2, or in this case you might say image, but I like to use messages, 1 as well. So now what I have is I have a really great CTA with a really great image as my campaign message. Until I come up with another one, I want to test that one against a new one. What about optimizing future campaigns? What was the intention of the campaign? What goals did it need to achieve? What was its objective? What one metric demonstrated that it did achieve the objective? What actions did you take to change the outcome? And how are you going to use that information in your next campaign to improve it? Now let's talk about presenting results, because this is where a lot of people get tripped up. Know your audience. Start with a person who's the champion or sponsor of the mission. What do they need and want to know? You might offer them certain metrics or ask them prior to the campaign. The next person you want to think about is who has to take action based on the campaign. What do they need to know? You also want to know and address the mission's goals. Keep it really simple. Don't give people a lot of information. Remember, brains don't like to do heavy lifting, and when they see a lot of information that they don't understand, it's easy for people to get lost. Attention is currency. That's why our friend the dog is back here. Just think of it this way. Are you willing to pay somebody $2,500 a slide or a page to read your report? Let's talk about presenting results. We'll go back to the Venn diagrams we've been using earlier. What you have is a lot of data. What people think an audience wants is a lot of data. What they really want are the relevant results that speak to conversions, trends, and insights to targets, tied back to the mission's goals, tied back to the campaign goals. So let's take a look at this. Mission goals. High-level restatement. You don't need to get into detail here. You may ask if everyone in the room is familiar with them. And if they are, simply move on. What are the campaign goals? Again, simple, high-level, short bullets that support the mission. Increase awareness of X by Y. Identify groups discussing topic Z. Next is conversions and trends. Right here, these are likes, shares, reads, clicks, signups. What was the goal? What was the result? Use bar graphs, pie charts, things that are easy for people to understand, especially if time is involved. Last month or last reporting period was here. This reporting period is here. Insights into the targets. If it's relevant, here you can spend a little time. Again, bullet points, provide the details in an appendix. Leave that supporting detail in the back. One last thing about this. There will be people in the room who want to get into the details. If it's okay with your champion or the other people in the room who have to act on that data to get into the details, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, take it offline with them outside the room. If I have 10 people in a room and their average weighted overhead rate is $300 an hour, that's $3,000 sitting there for 1 hour. How much of that time am I willing to burn to communicate the details of things to one person out of the 10? I'll take that offline. Okay, so let's talk about wiring. First thing I want to say is, with a sufficient budget, there are tools that centralize a lot of what we're going to discuss. In this section, I'm choosing these tools because, with the exception of one of them, they're all free and will allow you to build out and explore how to plan, organize, and execute social media programs. So let's start with the most popular platforms: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, YouTube. All of those are connectable through a platform called Hootsuite. Hootsuite allows you to post into all of those platforms. It's a social media management, engagement, tracking platform where you can post, manage, track, and report on those activities. Hootsuite's interface is simple, it's easy, and the integrations only take a few minutes. If you wanted to add in-depth sentiment and mentions, a paid tool like TalkWalker is required. TalkWalker monitors and reports on sentiment, meaning how people are feeling about your brand, for example, looking at granular mentions, and can make some inferences about words associated with your brand or the context of the information you're talking about. An example here would be the Weather Channel started naming summer storms. They did that in order to understand their reach and their virality outside the brand name. Because folks wouldn't say, for example, I heard about Summer Storm Charlotte on the Weather Channel. They just say, Charlotte's packing really big winds. Well, with a tool like TalkWalker, they can look for that type of content and sentiment and understand that they're getting good virality. If you're using a CTA that's going to send folks from your platform to an external resource like a website, well, now you've got to get some other tools involved, because Hootsuite can't see what happens once your target reaches a website. It simply says someone clicked on this link. It doesn't know what happened once they got inside. And that's what you're going to use Google Analytics for. Google Analytics can help you look into websites and other properties on the web or apps and see traffic and what's going on with traffic. And I'll take a little sidebar here and talk about things like a blog post. If you sent someone to a blog post from your social media site using a tool called Google Tag Manager, you can actually tell how far down that blog post they went before they stopped reading. Hootsuite TalkWalker can't do that. Remember back when I said to make sure that you name your campaigns carefully and you understand how they're wired together. This is where it gets really critical, because you're going to be bringing data together from multiple platforms to be able to create reports. If you're running mail programs, if you're doing email marketing, for example, MailChimp also integrates with Google Tag Manager and has, if you're using WordPress, great plugins for WordPress. But you can bring all that data together in Data Studio. And Data Studio will let you display that and even push it out to Google Sheets and allow you to create charts and graphs of it. So that's really helpful, because you can pull those back into your presentations or your documents and share them with other folks. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is learning the platforms. Both Hootsuite and Google have Academy programs. Google's Analytics Academy is not really strong on Google Tag Manager, so you might want to, sign up for Udemy and wait for someone to offer you $80, $90 off a class on Google Tag Manager, where you can purchase it for $10 and take it. And you'll learn a great deal about Google Tag Manager. In closing, just let me say that given the number of free tools and the amount of resources there are out there to learn more about measuring, there's no reason that you can't go forward and begin your own experiments and exercises in measuring social media. I hope you found this presentation helpful, and best of luck. Thanks.